I read this amazing book a few years ago, which is about physics. It's called The Beginning of Infinity by David Deutsch. And in it, he expresses the way that some ideas kind of open up an infinity of possibilities. And I think Agile is one of those. If you think at the limits of software development, something like a waterfall approach to you doing all the big upfront design thing is fundamentally constrained, however smart you are, because you've got to get all the decisions right at the start when you don't know anything. Agile is completely open-ended and an evolutionary approach to incrementally developing a system, which means that you can build systems that you can't even imagine when you start.
Yeah, but that scares the pants off of people.
It does,
right?
But it's true.
Business people are terrified of that. It's true, and it's necessary.
Yeah.
Right. But you talk to some business people, and what they want is certainty.
Yeah.
And they can't get it, so they live in this fantasy land of imagining that they have certainty when they don't. But they still keep demanding it, and then when things don't work out the way they want them to, they either drop into blame or they drop into craziness.
Yeah.
So, estimation, right? They say, well, that estimate was wrong, so we have to get better at estimation. And I'm going, nobody can get better at estimation. It's not possible.
Yeah.
Right. Because something always comes up.
Yeah.
So if something always comes up, then whatever you estimated is based on the wrong thing. You're estimating the wrong stuff.
Yeah.
And then they say, well, we'll re-estimate. And I'm going, have you read any books on lean in your life? Is that we do some work and then something changes and then we do the work over again and then something changes and we do the same work over again and over and over and over. And that takes up huge amounts of time, which makes your schedule slip even further.
Yeah.
And again, it's kind of crazy making is that Agile means agile, literally. And they don't want that, though. They want it to be something predictable and rigid and controllable.
Embracing change.
Where control is not possible, right?
Yeah.
So there you are. And it's often I find that when I come into a company as a consultant, depending on the company and the size, it's actually possible to get people to understand and start doing agile stuff. It's just that they never understood what it was. The problem is not evilness, if that's the word. The problem is not evil. The problem is lack of education. So they don't really understand what it's about. And often when they do understand what it's about, they actually prefer it over what they're doing now. In other words, somebody who's like an estimate guy, who's saying, I have to have an estimate, when are you going to deliver? And I'm going, well, why are you doing that? And the answer comes back typically as, I'm not going to invest $5 million into a project and not know whether it's going to work or not in a year.
Yeah.
So I've got to have estimates so that I can check progress against the estimate to see if we're going to deliver. And I'm saying, well, what if we actually deliver?
Yeah.
What if I give you something in 2 weeks and you can look at it and see if it's right or not, and we can adjust it. And if not, we can move on to the next thing. And we'll do the most important stuff first. And that way you know that you're not going to fail because the stuff that really matters, that's done.
Yeah.
Often people say, gosh, that would be great. Let's do that. And then they say, what do you call that? And I go, well, that's agile. And they go, no, that's not agile. But the point is that once you understand that way of thinking, it kind of makes sense. But the larger the organization, the harder it is to get people to work in a different way than what the organization is pushing. Is that the system? I'm a big systems guy, and the agile is a system. It's an organizational system, and it encompasses the entire organization, not just the engineering department or a team or something. And the problem, of course, is that with big systems like that, is that it's almost like they become sentient. Is they take on a life of their own that's completely separate from any of the people in the organizations. People leave, people come, and it doesn't matter. The system kind of forces the people into the mold of the system. And that happens even up at the C-level. So, in some organizations, a new CEO can come along and change things, but if the system is big enough and firmly enough established, even a CEO can't change it. So that's the only solution to that is basically to rip everything apart, maybe put it back together differently, maybe leave it apart. But not many people are willing to do that, particularly with a big corporation, for a reason, I understand the reasons. So I've kind of given up on those guys. Is that the big organizations, the systems that they work in don't allow them to change in any kind of significant way. And the most I can do as a consultant is nibble around the edges, is introduce TDD and things that'll give them a 5% improvement, maybe, or a 2% improvement. They're not going to get the, the times X improvements that you would get if you really worked in an agile way. And it's just part and parcel of the way that kind of thing works. And that, and often I see those same companies move backwards. I had a consulting gig a few years ago that was for a company that was so awful that it's given me an almost infinite supply of stories about how not to do things. And they were moving backwards as fast as they possibly could. When I went in there, they were doing Scrum badly. But at least the teams were actual cross-functional teams. And I worked with them for about 8 months. And at the end of the 8 months, the CTO was forcing them back into having a front-end team and a back-end team and an architecture team and a UX team. And I was going, this is crazy. All this is going to do is slow you down. And they were, well, these were people who said, we hired you to teach TDD. So shut up. You talk about anything other than TDD, you are out of here. And the person who was running the Agile transition was a tyrant who had come up with this kind of wacky version of Scrum. And she held the workers in contempt. She was always rolling her eyes, talking about, oh, learned helplessness. Where does this learned helplessness come from? And I'm going, this is not learned helplessness. This is actual helplessness. And it's because you keep telling them what to do.
Yeah.
And as long as you're telling them what to do, they can't do stuff on their own. So they don't want to do stuff, and you're punishing them when they do. So why do you expect them to suddenly be agile if you're going to punish them if they're agile? And she fired me basically when I said that. And then the person, I was doing this as a subcontract, and the main contractor talked to her and got her to back down from that. But basically, if you disagreed with her, you were fired. That was the modus operandi around there. And it's an extreme case, but I see stuff like that happening all the time. And it's frustrating. But there we are, right? That's the reality of the way a lot of companies work.